to be here. I think I've been strategically placed to send you off with a good news story to enjoy your tea and coffee. So I'll do my best. But the title is quite apt because that's exactly what's after happening. So for you to hear this talk, I've had to develop ulcers and go grey prematurely. So what I'll try to do today is bring you up to speed with what happened in the Civic Trust, what I was faced with when I took over 3 years ago, and what I've had to do since, and how we are today. So, what does the Civic Trust do? Well, it began in 1983, and it began with this ethos that was in a book written by the late director, Dennis Leonard. And he said, what appealed to our group was that Civic Trusts were self-help organisations that recognised that local authorities and other state agencies could not alone be expected to meet all society's needs in relation to the protection and enhancement of our environment, which is a very valid point. Too often we look at the government and we look at these type of agencies with the hand out, whereas if we did it for ourselves, it could probably get done an awful lot quicker. I think this is the quote that still underpins the ethos of how we manage the trust. Where common sense was introduced at a meeting with a civic-minded resident who pointed out that if some of the people at the meeting went and cut the grass themselves instead of trying to force the council into something they didn't want to do, it would have been done in half the time of the meeting. Isn't it a fair point? And we're still in the same boat. Although I will say that over the years we've developed a better working relationship with the council now. They do help us with the grass these days. Okay, so Civic Trust projects, even to this day, I suppose, from the building side of it, firstly, we're a heritage society. We're not just architectural heritage, that's just one arm. But we have done up some beautiful buildings. We have our Bishop's Palace, which I have a photo of, before and after photos coming up, and we have our Georgian House. Now, I just mentioned the Georgian House because a lot of you would know that during my time, in effect, I closed the Georgian House in Limerick, and to a lot of criticism. But the reason I had to close it was because it was hemorrhaging money. And at a time that, in better times, the Civic Trust may have been able to prop it up to some extent, but in these times, we couldn't. So we had to close it to rethink the business plan. But we do hope to open it within the next, hopefully before Christmas, but if not, in the early new year. So just to put that out. But it wasn't an easy, and that was one of the hard decisions, because I had to let 5 staff go who were with the Civic Trust for 18 years. And that's not an easy thing to do. And as you could imagine, a lot of emotion was spilled out at that time. But, thankfully, we're still surviving. From the environmental side, the Civic Trust looks after a hell of a lot of the river walks around the Limerick City. We do this because we look at her as our natural heritage, and that's somewhere we need to be. And we've done a couple of community gardens. One such community garden was on a wasteland in one of the most disadvantaged areas of the city, where the residents asked us, could we help them? So we built it for them because I have 60 staff on CE schemes now. And we can do this kind of work. So we help them, and I believe that's something that the Civic Trust needs to do to survive. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a while. Protection and upkeep, we look after all of the, I'll call them the ancient graveyards. So graveyards from the medieval times up to through the 1700s up to the 1800s. We have about 9 of them that we look after around the city. And then we did a lot of miscellaneous type projects over the years. You might have heard of our potato market in Limerick. The Mayor's Cathedral, we did a lot of work on the boundary walls. We put in some footbridges and just little bits and pieces to enhance the city. This was the very first project. This is St. Michael's graveyard. So you can see that's right in the city centre. A lot of people don't know about the graveyard in the city centre, but that was the before and after. So you can see the type of work we tried to do in terms of just leaving a much nicer area for people to enjoy. This is the footbridge that we put in over. This is right in the city centre. That's leading over to the Hunt Museum. So the Hunt Museum is on this side, and the potato market's on that side. So quite a nice bridge. That's the side of the Hunt Museum, the Custom House. Again, it's just an example of the kind of tidying up that we do in the city. This I put in because I think we should be ashamed of ourselves now, because we did that and let it go back to that. So unfortunately, over the years, we have turned our back on some projects. So it's not fair to say we're always great. We get it wrong sometimes too. And there's the Bishop's Palace. Now you can see what a difference that is, and that's done through CE schemes. So anyone who has reservations about CE schemes, I can tell you they're invaluable, and the lads that I have, I'm blessed to have them. Now, I leave this slide up for a moment because this is where, I suppose, the negative stuff starts. That's the Bishop's Palace, and my office is there with the flags hanging out the side of it. And I remember my nana said to me when I brought her up there, God rest her now, she said, I have a little balcony that hangs off the side, and she said, God, you're like the Pope with your little balcony hanging off the side. But what it showed was the splendour of the Bishop's Palace hid problems that were underneath the surface. The problems were that the Civic Trust, certainly since 2008, its membership had dropped by 50% due to businesses closing or a lot of our members had died. It had a very ageing membership base. I won't say government funding was cut because we never really had huge government funding outside of the CE schemes and a small council grant, so that didn't really matter. It was all about our membership and our fundraising. But what had happened was, in 15 years, the Civic Trust made a profit once. Now, we're a charity, so I shouldn't say profit, but a surplus. It always made losses. So even in the good times, we really didn't have a lot of money. So, what we were left with was an agency that was on its knees, that was about to close, that was being propped up because of its good reputation, which it deserved. But we needed to address the hard issues of cash. That was the critical thing. And unfortunately, the more softer issues, when I say softer, I mean the good news stories of doing up properties, doing projects, spending money here and there, had to stop. And we had to change the impression because the Civic Trust was perceived as an elitist group that people would not join. We were a closed shop, that no, we wouldn't allow anyone into us, and that was wrong. But the board did recognise it lost the ability to go out and engage with communities. We needed to come up with a new strategy of how to get back in there, because that's where it started. And somewhere along the way, something changed. And that's what we worked on. We have, since 2010, we've increased membership by 35%. And we've done this in two ways. Number one, going into the communities of Limerick City, starting with the most disengaged, starting with those who traditionally would never interact with a heritage-type organisation, who would feel it's not for them. And what we've done there is we've listened to the communities. I always think that the Civic Trust and groups like us, who do have a lot of expertise, I'm not an expert, you can see from the thing, I'm a scientist, I'm not an architect, or I'm not a heritage specialist, but we do have them on our board. I always felt that in an agency like ours, we should act as guides, not as directors. And our approach has been to sit down with communities and talk to them, hear what they have to say. And we heard a lot of negative comments, a lot of comments that really shouldn't be given to the Civic Trust. They complain about cuts, they complain about this, that, and the other. But every so often, a little gem appears. Something that means something to the community that you're dealing with. And that's where you have to listen. The best example I can give you is, last year we were engaged with a group up out in Weston in Limerick. And Weston is one of the region communities in Limerick. And in my opinion, the most seriously disadvantaged community in the city. Just horrific cases. And anyone from Limerick will know what I'm talking about in this instance. The Weston Community Grotto, which was built in the Marion year of 1954, had been destroyed by vandals, just wrecked. The statue was broken. People let animals graze in the grass around the grotto. It was just destroyed. And it's the only grotto in the city that was in that situation. I've never seen a grotto attacked. That one was. That'll tell you the extent of the problems. But it meant so much, and the community asked us to redo our grotto. That was what they wanted. Nothing else, the grotto. So we redid the grotto. That's a year ago now. And from that day to this, the grotto has never been touched. And that community have become involved with the Civic Trust. Now they can't afford, our membership is €250. They can't afford that. But some people have given 20 and 30 euros as thanks to the Civic Trust. That means more to us now than one person just giving 250 euros, because they're doing it for the right reason. They did it because they were never engaged with the Civic Trust before, now they are. Now they want to be engaged with us, and they're going to stay involved. And that's the plan of how we've stayed alive. So what I'm saying is, what we have to ask ourselves is, what is heritage? And we've looked at it in its broadest sense. It's familiarity, it's our soul, home, it's what's yours, it's your history. But without the communities of the city, you have nothing. What's the point in doing up a building if nobody will ever go into it? What's the point in doing a garden that no one wants to go into? You have to listen to what people are asking you. You can't do it all. Some of it is going to be nonsense, but some of it will be very, very clever. You have to find out what's important to an individual. It has to mean something to them, because what's left behind will be cared for by them. And that's a good example in the Western Grotto. Vandals may have wrecked it years ago, but now it's not being touched ever again. It means something to that community. The community will protect it. And that's what we need to work out. You have to leave it behind. So what will the future of the Civic Trust be? Well, there's a few things. We will go back to we're going back to its origin. The thing about cut the grass ourselves rather than asking the council to do it. We will branch into all areas of heritage. Our newest project that's starting will be looking at our sporting heritage. As you know, Limerick prides itself on being this sporting capital. There's a site beside King John's Castle that we're in negotiations with at the minute to build a sporting memorial within that. It's aimed at remembering the people of Limerick who represented Limerick at a national or international in sport. These people who will be forgotten if we don't remember. It's very easy to look at today's heroes like Paul O'Connell, etc. What about people from the 50s and 60s who were amateurs at the time? There was one lady who I know, she's a neighbour of mine, who had 150 caps for Ireland in hockey. She should be remembered. That's Mary Bartlett in it. It's people like that. We become a dynamic organisation. We went from an agency that, I suppose, had a PR campaign similar to that of the elves who helped the shoemaker, i.e. nobody knew what we were doing, to now where I write a monthly column in the local paper explaining where I take a project every month and say, we did this, because a lot of people don't know what we did. They assume, I suppose, the council would have done it. We have a membership now, which is, I had a board, and it's fair to say that the average age of the board would have been well up into the 60s. Now we have a very, very good range of ages, from people in their 20s right up to people in their 70s. And we did that because to try and get them in, to show them we needed you, we needed your help. And I'm sure a lot of agencies in this room today are probably in a similar type position. The only way you'll get around that and get younger people to engage is to actually go out there and ask them. But when you get them, give them something to do, get them involved, let them show an interest, and support that interest. And that's what we've had to do, and it's worked very well. Will we expand? Now, I put up there the Midwest Civic Trust. That might be unrealistic, but the reality is we have the two authorities joining together in Limerick now, the City and County Council, will join together. Traditionally, the Civic Trust has only worked within the city boundary. Now we will have to move out into the county, which is good, And maybe it will grow to a Midwest type organisation, because there's a lot of small civic trusts that are littered around, like Foynes have a small one. You know, that maybe we should all start coming together and help each other. I will say again, communities are the key. We continue to work with them. And as I said, membership has gone up by 35%. And that includes people who pay the 250 euros as well as just the 20 and 30 euros. And it's basically a reward for what we do. A lot of businesses in the area, or a few people who can afford that kind of money, give it as a thank you for what we did to their area, which is great. And the key point in it all is the trust will only support. What I mean by that is, yes, the trust will help them at the start, and we'll do it. But we will not take on a project unless it can be left behind in a sustainable manner. We showed you the example of the bridge that we did up and then we let it go back to its state. I mean, we should be ashamed of ourselves for doing that. And that won't happen again. So, what we will leave behind will hopefully from now on always be there for future generations to enjoy. That's it. I think I've kept on to my 15 minutes, so my chairman will be delighted. Just before I go, I'm not staying for the question session because I have to go back to Limerick. I get a bit nervous when I'm away from Limerick for too long. So, what I suggest, if anyone does have any questions or queries for me, you can email me and I'll email you back. My email is james@limerickcivictrust.ie. That's it. Thank you very much.